Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and a lot of you guys have been asking me every time we do an alpha Shadowlands stream, which classes are going to be viable. Nobody in Shadowlands wants to be left behind, and I understand why someone might feel like, well, what's the point of wasting time with a class like, let's say, if rogues were terrible in Shadowlands, which I don't think they're going to be, but let's say rogues were, let's say, set to be one of the worst classes to play with a brand new expansion. You don't want to be wasting all this time playing BFA now on a class that's just going to be bad at a later time. So a lot of you guys come with concerns when it comes to, is this class going to be good, or is that class going to be good? In today's video, I wanted to really hit on Demon Hunter because quite a few of you guys have been asking me, specifically Demon Hunters. Blizzard released Demon Hunter back in Legion, and they were a massive success. Going into Battle for Azeroth, they retained their relevance. I don't think anybody considers Demon Hunters bad. Most people consider Demon Hunters overpowered in some cases, because they have great self-sustainability, generally good PvP performance, amazing dungeon experience, and even wanted in certain dungeons for some of the cheesy mechanics that they can pull off that none of the other classes can. In some ways, Demon Hunters have been kind of a Swiss Army knife, at least the Havoc Demon Hunter, the DPS counterpart of the class. And a lot of people have picked them up because, well, they're quite good. They're quite easy to level. They're also quite easy to play. Compared to how they were in Legion and Battle for Azeroth in particular, they were really simplistic. So how are Demon Hunters looking for Shadowlands? Well, some of you guys might have heard that it looks like they're getting kind of nerfed. And I won't say nerfed, they're not getting crushed, they're just getting kind of tweaked at best. I think they're still going to be insanely strong and really powerful, but I don't think they're going to be nearly as absurd in some aspects as they have been. So I really want to dissect Demon Hunter on some of the things that you guys should be paying attention to. Now, what do I mean by kind of nerfed? Demon Hunter's Blade Dance no longer will have a dodge effect unless you are in Metamorphosis. So for certain boss fights, you were able to use dodge with Blade Dance outside of meta in order to ignore certain mechanics. Now you can't do that unless you enter Demon form, which they made kind of harder. There are certain talents that let you get into Metamorphosis and go for big damage, post an eye beam, and they lessen the duration in meta. So potentially you could be playing different builds, or maybe not sitting in meta quite for as long in order to get some mad damage like you used to in previous expansions. Outside of that, there are a couple of CDs that have been tweaked. Darkness is a much more, considerably longer of a CD, and you'll most likely end up using this maybe once per raid fight, maybe twice in a very long fight, but you won't be able to throw around Darkness nearly as often as you could. In Netherwalk, as a talent, if you end up going for that immunity ability, the CD is going to be quite hefty as well. On top of it, Leech for Demon Hunters no longer going to be passive. As a Demon Hunter, if you felt like your survivability was quite high, it's mostly because of baseline Leech for entering Metamorphosis. If you want to increase that Leech even further, there were talents that went with it. So the baseline Leech for Demon Hunters is going to be removed. Let's be honest, that part was kind of ridiculous. The amount of self-healing and self-survivability a Demon Hunter could do by themselves as a DPS Demon Hunter without really investing too many defensive cooldowns, it was quite nuts. Can Demon Hunters still survive a massive onslaught of enemies in dungeons when you're taking dice? Absolutely, but you will have to invest quite a few cooldowns, and you'll have to line up your abilities just a hair better. You might also have to kite enemies around quite a bit, waiting for your tank to come back. You're not going to be able to take as many punches to the face like you used to, but you will still be fairly livable. You will be survivable. You have still a lot of tools, it's just Blizzard is taking out certain aspects that might allow Demon Hunters to feel cheesy in certain mechanics. There are certain aspects with specs that just aren't enjoyable, like having rogues be able to stun lock everybody for years to come, or having a Destruction Warlock drop an Infernal and one-shot people into Globals of a Chaos Bolt, mostly in PvP. So certain aspects of the game definitely have to be changed around, and with Shadowlands getting a variety of class changes and also a return of a variety of abilities, maybe even new mechanics getting implored, a lot of specs are going to have new things come to them, and also certain old things may be taken away in order to mold them into a better version of what they used to be. So let's talk about all those new abilities or old abilities that Demon Hunters have that are coming back. Well, Demon Hunters don't really have a history. They started out in Legion and mostly were revolved around the artifact weapon. Then Battle for Azeroth came out and there were traits which were temporary. And going into this expansion, well, Demon Hunters don't really have new things that they used to have, and not a lot of new abilities really getting added. There are some cool new talents, but most of them are inspired from previous expansions or simply are modified versions of what the old talents were, just to be made more considered, but there's nothing really new here. Don't get me wrong, there might be some builds you might be able to pull together, and some of these abilities really do look cool, and there could be a potential for Demon Hunters to really explore with legendaries that might be the key player in terms of how you customize your Demon Hunter and specific playstyle. As for giving you a whole list of a variety of different mechanics and abilities that is new for Demon Hunter, there's really not a lot. And that's definitely something worth considering. Reality sometimes can be disappointing, and Demon Hunter reality is really simplistic. The spec itself is mostly going to play the same as BFA. Potentially could be other builds, and I'll talk about builds in just a second in terms of talents and how they feel, but right now the strongest build that I found so far is very similar to the original BFA playstyle. You'll still do the same things like blade dance in order to put a dot on enemies and trying to cleave enemies if ever possible, trying to maintain your immolation aura, which is nice as the ability's baseline, but you'll be grabbing most likely a talent that has the fury generation with it. For the most part, you'll be trying to land I-beams in order to enter metamorphosis and trying to max out the damage while the I-beam provides you this enhanced form. We are still early in the alpha, so potentially Blizzard could allow us opportunities with buffs and nerfs to develop a build somewhere in between of the starter Legion build, which is more about momentum and using your movement abilities in coordination with your other abilities in order to buff your damage. And it's really being all about kind of auto attacking the enemy and building the resources. Then after you have a bit of resources, using that momentum with charges and backflips in order to create opportunities for big damage. And maybe the playstyle for Demon Hunters could be this momentum Legion playstyle and a mix of Battle for Azeroth, I-beam metamorphosis, demonic playstyle. Or maybe it could be something else completely. Again, we didn't talk and haven't seen what the legendary system might bring for Demon Hunters in particular just yet. But we also do gotta consider this spec was born with the idea that your artifact weapon is going to be a main component. Then we had traits that kind of created extra components for this spec, and this is still probably the most bare bones, I would say, the most bare bones spec that we have even right now looking at it into Shadowlands. Personal problems with the spec for me, I'd say it's a little too simple. The spec can be broken down, and a lot of specs can be right now in Battle for Azeroth, be broken down into like 4, 5, or 6 main abilities. But Demon Hunters, I feel like, have gotten simpler from Legion into Battle for Azeroth, and with us losing all the traits and essences, they are somehow finding a way to get simpler into the next expansion. This is a spec with a few abilities that are super effective, and there's nothing bad about it. However, seeing some of the other classes get a variety of different abilities, different curses for your warlocks, different abilities that rogues are getting, different abilities that paladins are getting with talents getting reshuffled, certain passives influencing different playstyles for death knights and so on and so forth, Demon Hunters just don't seem like they have this evolution as they will level throughout Shadowlands. They're not getting too many crazy passives that might encourage certain playstyles and really give you that diversity of play. Don't fix what ain't broken, and slamming your head on Annihilate and Blade Dance and I-beam and your Demon's Bite is super fun. However, it does get boring after a while. We can all agree with that. I feel like Demon Hunters is a pretty picture with not a lot of paint on it, and there's a lot that could be added. This is the perfect opportunity for Blizzard to really take the spec that is loved by many, a spec that is fairly easy to get into because it normally starts at a higher level, a spec that's going to have to start at level 10 with everybody else in Shadowlands, and your progression of you gaining abilities over time is going to be probably the most meager compared to all the other classes in the game. I understand Blizzard wanted to design Demon Hunter as an easy to get into, very simple and to understand, simple to pick up, and very mobile class with a lot of cool flashy abilities that just about everyone can enjoy. However, I feel like there's just so much potential that's missing from Demon Hunter. I highly doubt that Demon Hunter is going to be bad. I think it's actually might even still, with all these gripes, be one of the better melee to bring into dungeons and into raids and even into PvP. It could potentially be one of the top 5 and could be maybe even top 3. I just think it could be super boring to play and could be really unenjoyable unless you're looking for that simplistic gameplay and being effective. The spec wasn't really ever complicated, but even Legion gave it at least some sort of a flavor mechanic to it, with momentum being a good portion of your movement. And going into Battle for Azeroth, it got a little simplified. You could amp it with your traits, but going into Shadowlands right now, it's looking pretty simplified. So maybe the legendaries will help it. But thank you guys so much for checking this video. If you had doubts on Demon Hunter, hopefully this video at least gave you a bit of a breakdown and my thoughts. Thank you all, and I'll see all of you in the next one.